The Ozark Mountains in 1895 were a place of mystery. Rolling ridges swallowed the horizon, and valleys lay deep and hidden, where sunlight often failed to reach. The people of nearby towns spoke of those valleys in hushed tones, especially one called Lost Hollow. Few dared to travel there, for it was said that a clan lived apart, shunning outsiders. They were known as the Holloways. Rumors swirled around them. Some claimed they were cursed, others that they were merely private folk who wanted nothing of modern ways. Yet, late at night, when the wind shifted, townsfolk swore they could hear their songs drifting through the trees, low, mournful hymns that raised the hair on the back of one's neck. The Holloways were rarely seen, but when they did come to market, they brought woven baskets, jars of honey, and roots from the woods. They always traded quickly, speaking little, and returned to their valley before sunset. Something about them seemed both ordinary and otherworldly. It was the kind of mystery that drew both fear and fascination, and in the autumn of 1895, the whispers began to grow louder. No one had seen the Holloways in months. Sheriff Elias Dalton was not a man given to superstition. At 50, with a limp from a bullet wound during the war, he was a man of fact and duty. His gray beard was trimmed neatly, his eyes steady and kind. But when a traveling peddler came through town, muttering that the Holloway cabins were quiet as a graveyard, Elias felt the weight of unease settle on him. In his office, he lit his pipe and stared at the map pinned to the wall. Lost Hollow was marked faintly in pencil, a valley cut deep between ridges. He remembered the Holloways, children who stared with wide, curious eyes, and a matriarch who sold wild herbs. They weren't criminals. They weren't dangerous. They were just different. Still, something gnawed at him. He had seen sickness spread before, and he had buried more than one friend because of it. If something had happened to the Holloways, it was his duty to know. That night, as the church bell tolled, Elias made his decision. At dawn, he would ride into the hollow. The next morning, as he saddled his horse, a voice called from behind. "Sheriff Dalton, are you going to the hollow?" It was Clara Whitfield, the new schoolteacher. She had been in town only 6 months, but already her presence had stirred things. At just 22, Clara was younger than most expected for a teacher, with auburn hair and bright, searching eyes. She carried herself with a quiet strength that impressed Elias. "I reckon I am," he replied. "Take me with you," she said quickly. "The Holloway children. They never come to school, but I've seen them at the market. They deserve to learn, Sheriff. If something has happened, I want to help." Elias frowned. "It's not a Sunday ride, Miss Whitfield. Could be sickness, could be worse." But Clara didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid. If they're in need, we can't just turn away." He studied her a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "All right, then. Saddle up. But you stay close, you hear?" And so, together, the sheriff and the schoolteacher set out toward the place others feared to tread. The trail into the mountains was rough, winding through forests that smelled of pine and damp earth. Birds scattered as their horses clopped over rocks. As they rode, Clara asked questions about the Holloways, but Elias's answers were sparse. "They keep to themselves," he said. "Don't ask for trouble. Don't cause it neither." Clara looked thoughtful. Isolation can make people misunderstood. Perhaps they only needed someone willing to see them. By late afternoon, the forest thickened. Shadows stretched long, and the air grew colder. When they reached the mouth of Lost Hollow, the silence was startling. No dogs barked, no children played. The usual curl of chimney smoke was absent. Clara shivered. "It feels abandoned." Elias narrowed his eyes, scanning the valley. "Or worse," he muttered. They tied their horses and approached the first cabin. Its door creaked open at Elias's push. Inside, dust floated in shafts of fading light. A pot of stew sat cold on the hearth, a spoon still resting in it. Beds were neatly made, coats hung on pegs, but there were no people. The next cabin was the same, and the next. A doll lay on the floor of one, its button eyes staring up at Clara as she bent to pick it up. She felt a lump rise in her throat. "It's like they vanished," she whispered. Elias's jaw tightened. Folks don't just vanish. Something happened here. Yet the cabins offered no sign of struggle, no blood, no violence, only silence. Outside the largest cabin, Elias crouched low, studying the ground. Strange circular markings had been pressed into the earth, patterns he didn't recognize. "Not animal tracks," he muttered. Clara noticed braided strands of grass tied above the doorways. She touched one gently. "A symbol," she said. "But of what?" Elias shook his head. "Superstition, maybe. Could be some ritual. But why?" The wind picked up, rattling the empty cabins. Both felt a creeping sense that the hollow was not just deserted, it was waiting. In the patriarch's cabin, Clara found a leather-bound journal tucked beneath a bed. Its pages were filled with neat handwriting, telling of everyday life, planting corn, hunting, weaving. But as the entries continued, a darker tone emerged. Strange lights above the ridge, voices carried in the night, a sickness that no doctor can name. The final entry froze Clara's blood. "The mountain calls. If we are taken, we go together. Better the hollow than the fire." She read the words aloud. Elias's face hardened. "Taken? By who?" Clara whispered. "Or by what?" They decided to stay the night in one of the cabins, though unease hung over them like fog. Elias built a small fire, his revolver close at hand. Clara tried to sleep but dreamed of children singing, their voices weaving together like a lullaby that grew louder until it turned into whispers. She woke with a start, heart racing, certain she heard footsteps outside. But when Elias checked, the night was empty. Only the wind moved through the trees. At dawn, both were pale and restless. Clara admitted, "It felt as if someone was watching us." Elias only nodded grimly. He had felt it too. Following faint footprints in the dew, they came upon a limestone ridge half hidden by brush. At its base yawned a dark cave. The strange spiral markings carved into the earth appeared here too, etched deep into the rock. Clara's breath caught. "Do you think they went inside?" "Only one way to know," Elias said, striking a match and lighting his lantern. The cave smelled of damp stone and ash. As they stepped inside, the lantern's light revealed walls covered in handprints, large and small, smeared in black soot. The air grew thick, pressing on their chests. Clara clutched Elias's arm. "This place isn't natural." The deeper they went, the stranger it became. In a chamber lay offerings, corn husks, animal bones, and wooden carvings of faces twisted in sorrow. Some had been arranged in circles, as if for a ritual. Suddenly, faint singing echoed from deeper within the cave. Human voices, layered, mournful, unearthly. Clara's eyes widened. "It's them," she whispered. Elias lifted the lantern, heart pounding, and called out, "Holloways! Sheriff Dalton here. Show yourselves." But when they reached the chamber the voices came from, it was empty. The song faded into silence, leaving only the flicker of the lantern and the heavy beat of their hearts. Whatever had happened to the echo of singing lingered in the air long after it ceased, as if the stone itself remembered. Clara clutched her shawl tighter. "They were here, Elias," she whispered. "I swear I heard children's voices." Elias lowered his lantern, scanning the chamber. Echoes can play tricks on the mind. But he didn't sound convinced, and his hand trembled just slightly. In the stillness, Clara bent and picked up a small wooden toy carved like a horse. Its edges were smooth with use. She held it close, her voice trembling. This belonged to one of them. Elias took a long breath. "Then the question is, why leave it behind?" The cave seemed to press in around them, heavy with secrets. On their way back from the cave, They nearly collided with a ragged figure leaning on a walking stick. He appeared as if out of the mist, bearded, thin, with pale, milky eyes. "Silas," Elias muttered. He knew of the hermit who lived high in the ridges, a man who hadn't spoken to townsfolk in years. Silas raised a bony finger. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was cracked, like dry wood breaking. Elias straightened. "We're looking for the Holloways. Have you seen them?" The hermit's eyes seemed to look through them rather than at them. "They've gone where you cannot follow." They answered the mountain's call. Clara stepped forward. "What does that mean? Where are they?" Silas only shook his head. "Better to vanish into the earth than to burn in the fire. The Hollow took them, and the Hollow keeps what it claims." Before Elias could press him further, the hermit melted back into the forest, leaving only his words and a chill running down their spines. That night back in town, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the images, the abandoned cabins, the handprints on the cave walls, the haunting song, the Holloway children's faces, faces she had glimpsed at market, stayed with her. She confided to Elias the next morning, "I can't stop thinking about them. Whatever pact they believed in, it cost those children their future. They should have been in school. They should have had choices." Elias leaned back in his chair, weary. "Sometimes folks get bound up in old ways, Clara. Fear drives them deeper than reason." Clara's jaw tightened. "Then it's fear that destroyed them. And if fear can take a whole family, then the best thing I can do is fight it with knowledge." Her conviction struck Elias like a bell. She wasn't just mourning the Holloways, she was making a promise. News of the mystery spread quickly. Farmers whispered in the market, mothers hushed their children at bedtime with tales of the vanishing. Some said the Holloways had been taken by witches. Others swore they had seen ghostly lights drifting above the hollow at night. Fear clung to the town like smoke. No one dared venture near Lost Hollow. Clara, however, carried the journal she'd taken from the patriarch's cabin. Each evening, she studied its words, looking for clues. The entries became her lantern in the darkness, evidence that these people had once been alive, breathing, struggling, and afraid. She would not let their story vanish. One cold morning, Clara arrived at the schoolhouse to find a small package resting on the doorstep. No one had seen who left it. Inside was a folded piece of paper in a child's uneven handwriting. "Miss Whitfield, don't worry. We are safe. The mountain took us where no sickness can reach. Remember us with kindness." Beside the note was a strand of braided grass, tied with a small ribbon. Clara sat heavily at her desk, tears blurring her vision. The children were gone, yes, but the letter carried warmth, as if they wanted her to let go of fear and remember them not with sorrow, but with love. When Clara showed the letter to Elias, he studied it for a long while. His grizzled face softened. "Maybe they found peace," he said quietly. "Not the kind you or I would choose, but peace all the same." He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Your duty now isn't to chase ghosts, Clara. It's to care for the children still here. Teach them, guide them, make sure no one else feels so cut off that they fade into the mountains." His words sank deep into Clara's heart. She realized he was right. She couldn't bring the Holloways back, but she could honor them by shaping the future of others. From that day forward, Clara poured her whole soul into teaching. She welcomed every child, poor, rich, orphan, or wanderer. She brought books, drew pictures, and read stories aloud. She taught them to question fear and to trust in learning. When parents muttered that their children had better work the fields than sit in school, Clara answered firmly, "Education keeps us from becoming another Hollow." The Holloways became her unspoken inspiration. Their absence lit a fire in her that no hardship could extinguish. Years passed. Sheriff Dalton grew older, his hair silver, his limp heavier, yet his friendship with Clara remained strong. On his last winter, as he lay in his bed, he asked Clara to sit with him. "Clara," he said, his voice a whisper, "the Holloway mystery. It wasn't about where they went. It was about what they taught us. Fear and ignorance can swallow lives whole, but hope and knowledge, those things keep us alive." She held his hand as his eyes drifted shut for the final time. His words became her guiding star. Years later, on quiet evenings, Clara sometimes walked the ridge overlooking Lost Hollow. The cabins had long since rotted, reclaimed by vines and trees. The cave entrance was half collapsed, swallowed by earth. Yet when the wind blew just right, she swore she could hear faint singing, soft, childlike voices echoing across the valley. But instead of fear, Clara felt peace. The Holloways had not vanished into nothing. They had become part of the land they loved, their voices woven into the very breath of the mountains. Clara lived long enough to see many of her students grow into leaders, teachers, healers, and farmers who worked not from fear, but from knowledge. She often told them, "The Holloways left us a mystery. We may never know why they vanished, but we know this. Fear isolates, knowledge connects. If we let fear rule, we risk becoming a hollow ourselves." And so, the macabre mystery of Lost Hollow lived on, not as a tale of ghosts, but as a parable. A reminder that while people may vanish without a trace, their choices echo in those left behind. Clara would sometimes smile at her pupils and add softly, almost to herself, "Better the light than the hollow." The children never forgot, and in that way, the Holloway story never truly ended.